So today's episode, Jordan, we have somebody slightly different coming on. Going to talk from both a medical viewpoint, but also as a parent. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Oh yeah, it's going to be all about teens, everybody's favorite topic, teens, adolescents. I think she defined it as people 10 to 20.
Oh, that's brave, and probably the hardest conversation for parents to be having with their kids. So this week we have the wonderful Hina Talib. Please, can you introduce yourself, Hina?
Thank you for having me. So, I am Dr. Hina Talib. I'm a pediatrician and an adolescent medicine specialist, which means I take care of teenagers really in that special age range from about 10 to 25 years old. I practice here in New York City. I'm also a writer and a spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Wow, that's great. As someone who lives in a house with four teenagers, I love dearly, but I can't wait for them to be gone. Also, so why did you get into adolescent medicine? Like, what were you thinking? Why are you so passionate about this?
You are not the first person to ask me that. A lot of people will say, "Oh, just bless you for taking care of this age group." And I've heard it my whole life, honestly. And I just love working with teenagers. There is something about this age group that is so empowering and vibrant and creative and futuristic to me almost. It's just, I believe that being able to see them for who they are and helping them reflect who they are to the world and engage in the world in a positive way, I believe it will change our world for the better. And it's just a privilege for me to be part of that. And yes, I know it's dicey and I know it's hard. And I think all parents and even pediatricians who take care of teenagers, we all just have to laugh about how hard it is sometimes. But I always try to remind people that it's also really magical, and they're really just a lot of what looks really kind of striking from the outside on the inside is actually developmentally normal. It's just a little turbulent at times.
Yeah, I often think about it, in like I see them as they're as you said, they're like teenagers. They're totally fantastic. I hate the idea that we're always like, oh my god, teenagers, like it's
Hmm.
hard. And I hope I didn't come off that way. I mean, it is hard, but it's hard because they're little tiny adults without a lot of practice, and so it's like living. It's like if you had a bunch of roommates who never learned how to live with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really funny analogy. I like that. I do think teenagers get a bad rap overall, but I think they're very special, and I think that and anybody who cares for teenagers or parents teenagers would agree with me. Of course, it's just we just have to help, and sometimes helping means actually not saying anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Now I was looking now for any of our listeners who are like, how do you do this? How do you deal with teenagers? I was checking out your Instagram. It's my teen health. Is that right? At my teen health. Is that we
Teen
should put
Health
you
Doc, yeah, at
teen
Teen
health
Health
doc
Doc
at teen
on
health doc
Instagram.
on
Hmm.
Instagram, and you have like not only a ton of awesome advice and all of these like infographics that tell you like great questions to ask, conversations to have, one to be considered at, but you have a ton of followers there. Like I can hear my teens will think you're important. They don't think like Miles Davis is important because he doesn't have enough followers, but you are.
Oh, oh dear. Yeah, it's great. Teenagers do definitely keep me timely, which is great. But even they will tell me, Instagram is like for our kids now. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, I joined Threads, so hopefully that'll make me cool again. Um, but yeah, I think adolescents and their relationship with social media is actually something that's a super hot topic right now. And in fact, parents' relationships with their own social media should be too.
I think we're going to come on to that in a little bit. So, one of the things I've spent a bit of time on your channel, and I really get that passion that you have for young people and the positivity around it. Like, you really focus on practical advice about how to talk to young people, how to relate to them, and really kind of putting into focus, themes around respect, privacy, and just advocating for the kids to have their space in the world.
Mhm.
And, like we were saying at the beginning of the chat, it's sometimes easier said than done. How can parents start these conversations with their teenagers if they haven't already been having those conversations?
It's always great to start a conversation with connection and with something positive. So if you're already doing that because you are laughing at the same joke or watching something on Netflix together that you both enjoy, or playing a sport or watching a sport that you are getting excited about and you're on the same team, those feel good moments are a good time to have a conversation about, I was thinking about you and I was thinking about how X, Y, or Z is challenging and how are you doing? Like, I just
Mm,
want to know how you're doing. Instead of, sometimes people like to make a conversation a whole big scary moment. We're gonna have a conversation. Let's have a talk. Let's do it Sunday at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then they're like worried about it because what does my parent want to talk to me about? Why did they set a time? And why is it tomorrow and not today?
yeah.
And so sometimes just going with the flow of when your family is kind of already feeling good and happy and having a connected moment is the right time to just, it might feel like you're saying it out of nowhere, I found that it is actually the right time to say, I was just thinking about you, I was thinking about this, I just want to know how you are.
Thanks. That's great advice. I think certainly something that Jordan and I might go away and practice.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because I feel like one of the things that parents in general are just not very good at when it comes to teenagers is listening. You know,
Mm,
myself included. I don't want anyone to think I'm pointing fingers. You know, we think we know best. We think it's our job to tell them. We still are in that like mindset of I have to scream at them to not cross the street while traffic is coming because they're little people who can make bad mistakes. But
yeah.
they're starting to grow up. Do you have advice for how we can do a better job of like listening to the teens to understand what their issues are, what they're dealing with? Because I think we're often wrong as their parents.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Listening is the most important parenting skill for many different life stages, but particularly for adolescents who do have a lot of thoughts going on in their heads and aren't equipped always to share them in the most helpful ways. But neither are some adults, to be fair. So I think that listening is super important. My advice would be to say half or less than half of what you intended to say, so really to be conscious of listening more than talking. Open-ended questions are helpful. Not all teenagers like to or feel comfortable having face-to-face conversations. So sometimes having them talk when they're chatty and then just be there to listen. So catch their chatty moments. Their chatty moments might be when you're picking them up from an activity and you're both in the car. Car conversations are huge because you're not looking at each other and it's less stressful. And perhaps you're listening to like a song you both like, and then you can talk. But listening is a skill. So like if you are not good at listening as a parent, that's okay. Very many people are not, and it actually is
Yeah.
something that you can like learn about how to be a better listener. And it means creating the space, truly listening and not speaking over them, reflecting back what you hear to make sure that you heard it right and that you're kind of synthesizing it right, and then asking their permission if they want you to jump in with guidance or advice. Or are you just here to vent? And are you just venting? That's cool because I'm happy to just listen.
I love that, particularly that last bit of advice. I think that is so key. I think we all go into protect mode, especially if our kid's having a hard time. It's like, I want to do something to help you. And sometimes it can make things so much worse. And we do take away that agency and that
Hmm.
resilience building that teens need to go through.
Yeah, I wanna also ask you, like, we do a lot of talk about this sort of adolescent as a category, right? The teen as a category, and of course this is what your work. But there's also a lot of really specific cases, individual cases, for where adolescence has unique challenges. Whether we're talking about socioeconomic different economic groups, LGBTQ communities, BIPOC
Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
there's very specific structural things that are shaping the experience of teens, and when can we generalize, universalize, and be like, this is the teen experience, and when do we really need to look at the specific causes?
You know, it's interesting because I share this advice on my Instagram account and in other outlets, and when I'm asked to comment about adolescent health issues, and I always feel so nervous doing it because I truly think that when you're parenting an adolescent or young adult, there's a lot of nuance, and you're best suited to parent the kid that's actually in front of you and not take the cookie cutter advice that's being shared with the masses through media, through the parenting metaverse. And I think,
All of
and
the
it's
media
ironic
except
because
this podcast, right? All of the media except this.
except this very podcast, because we are speaking to you. Yeah, I think that is an area that I struggle with internally, and I'm trying actually more and more these days to say, if this doesn't apply to you, don't let it bother you, because it's not gonna, this piece of advice may not apply to the child that you have. And we actually have to look at the child that you have, the circumstances that they're living in, what else they have brought in. I often say, like, from 0 to 10, a lot of great things happen in life, but for a lot of kids also a lot of not so great things happen in their lives. A lot of hard things may have happened in their lives, and they only process that, or begin to really process that, from 10 to 20. So some kids come into their adolescence with, having had complex health conditions, having had changes in their household structure, having financial hardship, having experienced racism, having been othered in so many different ways, and they process that in adolescence. So you absolutely have to look at the whole picture when you are kind of giving and taking advice.
It's putting a real human twist on it. And again, one of those things that sounds easier said than done is to really know your child. I think a lot of us feel that sort of disconnect starting to happen when they're teenagers, but you do have to trust your instinct that you have shared your life with this person. Again, those listening skills I think would be really, really helpful there as well. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and bring it back into my sphere. So, kids and tech. What do you think are the main pros and cons for young people in online spaces?
So, echoing sort of what I was saying before, I really strongly feel that it's very hard cookie cutter advice on this topic. I think you really do need to parent the teen in front of you. I do think that for many adolescents that I work with, they have positive relationships with their media. I have found that some of those that have the most healthy and most positive relationships with their media, this is going to be controversial, actually started with their use earlier, when they were very accepting of rules and were a little bit more rule followers before they were in. And for others who were given them at a certain age, when it was sort of like, okay, and you're just given this phone without, really having had the developmental lead up to it and the conversations and the graded exposures to it that parents who give and share devices at younger ages do. So really, I do think that you have to look at the kid in front of you. I think that the important part of it is development and relationship with the device, to see what they're using it for, how it's making them feel, what their intention is, and helping them to really conquer it. Now, for some kids, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be they have problematic use. And if that's the case, the device is very different. For other people, it's episodic that it's problematic, meaning that there are big feelings related to events that are happening online, right? There's entire worlds online for them. So as you can have drama in your in-person life, you can have drama in your online life, and you need the tools to resolve the drama or angst in both places. And the tools are very different. So I think it's a lot about development, relationship, intention, support. And I mean, I can't hit this home enough, but like, it's parents. It is, it is a parenting, and I'm going through this right now. I have a 5 and 7-year-old. I've already sort of regretted, or I'm not sure that we're having the best relationship with the Switch right now. And it's hard. It's like the Switch is winning. And so I'm living it, and I'm working with the parents in my school. We're having conversations as parents about what are we going to do are we going to unite as parents in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade to talk about what we are comfortable with having device wise for our little kids, because the middle school parents are telling us what they regretted and what they're going through, and it's really eye-opening and it's really shocking. And so here I am. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a mom. I'm an adolescent medicine specialist, and in this with folks, like it is
Yeah.
just it's not easy.
It's not, and I think, so the takeaways I got there was about setting the kind of norms and the expectations, helping them to build healthy relationships where possible, but also it's that positive role modeling, which, increasingly, all of us are online more and more, and so there is definitely a balance needed there.
Yeah, it is so much about the parents' relationship too. With, I hear a lot of parents coming at me with, tell them that they can't be on their phone, tell them I need to take their phone away. It's a consequence, right? That I can take the phone away. And it's sort of like, well, what are you doing with your phone? And if you're telling them to take the phone away the hour before bedtime and charge it outside in the hallway, where's your phone? um, and it's really, and when you're speaking to them and when you're sort of moving through your day in your home, in your car, are the phones out, and are there spaces that there are no phones? Because if you're not doing it, then it's much easier, and they'll accept it much more if you ask them to do it if you're not doing it too. And if you're talking about, well, how's their cell phone, talk to them about how your relationship is, and my children knew the word Instagram at a very young age because I was a media person on Instagram, and I'm not proud of that. And so I've definitely had to be more intentional about when I'm taking pictures and when I'm having my phone out and doing my work, and calling it that. This is work. I am doing this for work. And then now I'm going to put it down. But being very verbal with, I think, the people around you about when you have your phone out and why you have it out, I have found to be helpful. And it just makes you remember too.
Yeah, and of course you can extrapolate that to so many things, even beyond tech. I often think about, you hear the parents who go, I can't get my kid to read books, and I'm like, well, when's the last time they saw you reading a book, right?
Yep.
Right, right.
Yes.
And so I kind of want to take that and that idea and ask you a question, moving into but back to the tech question, especially specifically to adolescents, and because as you already pointed out, very different questions for younger kids, adolescents. How do we understand, like how do we figure out which are the, and I mean this culturally, not necessarily as parents, like which are the things that the things we have to be really attentive to that are just part of the teen experience, whether we're talking about social anxiety, sexual awakening, body image, reckless, all these things that are just a normal part that are now happening within a context of digital tech, and what's actually because of the digital tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that in some ways there are strong parallels, because you can find yourself in tricky sexual and reproductive health arena situations in real life as well as online. You can find yourself in bullying situations in real life and online. You can find yourself with substance abuse, opportunities, unfortunately, online as well. It's being sold and talked about, and in real life, obviously, as well. So there are ways to talk about. I almost think that everything that we talk about in real life, that is sort of like in the risk category of things that adolescents might encounter, that we as pediatricians, sometimes when after these things have happened, end up playing a role in it. But if you're thinking ahead, all the counseling that we do about safety in real life, there should be a corollary for it. And this could happen online, and this is how you handle it online. So you practice saying no to substances that you're not wanting to experiment with in real life. You practice how to say it online. You practice how to say no to certain sexual encounters that you're not ready for in real life. You practice a funny, witty response that you can send to somebody if they've asked you for a sex. So like you really do. I think that there's a lot of learning and bi-directional conversations that should just become more fluid. We should all just be talking about, this could happen here, or it could happen in this place, and how do you prepare yourself and in anticipation of these opportunities coming your way in both places.
And being really transparent about it as well, I think, isn't it? Specifically thinking about, again, my area of work. So what do you think tech companies and platforms should be thinking about when they're designing with kids and teens in mind, and particularly thinking about youth well-being?
Mm. You know, I think that content moderation and algorithms to me are very important for us to keep talking about. And I think the age verification is also very important and very dicey. I don't know exactly the right answers on,
Hmm.
on all of those, but I I have heard actually adolescents themselves tell me I would just love a reset button for my page, other than having to completely close it and start a new page. If they could reset, if there was an algorithm reset button when they know, okay, I've gotten into a bad, I've gone down a rabbit hole. This was not healthy. I don't want to be looking at this content. All it's showing me is this content. I've tried to use the tools to block the words and this and that. I'm still being shown the content. And so I've heard them say I would love and I've heard other people talk about it. And I ask adolescents sometimes, like, would you use that? Would that work? And I mean, it's like very clear that they would use a reset button, if it meant that they didn't have to start their entire account again. Um, so I like that. I think age
I love
verification is
that.
important. Yeah.
I love that idea, especially when I think back to my own teen years and remember, like, I can always remember, like, the end of the summer, spending a lot of time thinking, how do I want to show up at school? Who am I going to
Yeah.
be this year? This year, imagine if you could just reset your profile. I remember thinking years ago about how hard it must be to, I know a lot of people are like, the internet, everything's remembered, and that's bad for jobs. I always thought about this. Like, teenagers need to reinvent themselves constantly until they figure out what works, and it's really hard to do when there's a permanent visual record.
Yeah.
Right. And if
100%.
you have to go through and like delete it one photo by photo or caption by caption, it's a lot of work. So, but yeah, but so. Mhm.
Hopefully, some of our friends in the tech space are listening, because I think that's a really great recommendation.
So
Yes, I think the age verification, is important too.
absolutely, absolutely. And so what are some of the sort of things that we're not talking about enough? Like, when it comes to teens, adolescents, digital technology, what's something you think about that really that really hasn't entered the mainstream conversation yet, but you really wish it would?
I think that in practice, in clinical practice, one of what it comes back to me more often than not is sleep and movement. And so I think that it's been helpful for me to really focus these conversations on, if the conversations around the device and the media use is sensitive and already been heated. I sometimes shift to talking about sleep and movement, and I get to the same endpoint with a lot more buy-in, because it's a value that the kid shares, the parent shares, everybody agrees that sleep is important.
Yeah.
And the teen is able to, one of my favorite questions is like, how satisfied are you with your sleep? How satisfied are you with your social media? How satisfied are you with your level of movement of your body? And so I let them grade it themselves and then sort of ease into those conversations. But I don't think we talk enough about adolescent sleep. Adolescents are chronically sleep deprived as an age group. And I think media does play a role there. And I think there's skills to be taught on how to protect your sleep. And movement too, it's a different conversation, but for some people, it does make it less likely for them to move, because they're satisfied with, in the moment of spending their free time that they do have in the day, doing a more sedentary activity. So those are a couple issues. And there was something else that I think that by and large, a lot of the media headlines and a lot of the articles and a lot of the reaction to our Surgeon General has been very, it tends to be very negative, even though the Surgeon General's report actually does talk about the positive uses of media.
Yeah.
Um, but the headlines do tend to be very, very negative. And I think it's, as an adolescent medicine specialist, I do provide care for LGBTQ youth, and for other youth who feel different in different ways, whether it's they have different abilities or they have different health issues, and they find community in these spaces, and they adore these communities of people who look like them or go through challenges like they do. Have been so very helpful. And so I think that doesn't get enough attention of how amazing these supportive communities there are online for people who have a very niche health condition similar to yours, or who identify as LGBTQ and have gone through very similar challenges that you have, or very loving, wonderful experiences, and it's actually even more important for them to see that. And so, yeah, that
And
would
we
be
need to and we
another
need to
thing.
protect those spaces, don't we? Both the
Yes,
communities
yes,
in them, but also the spaces themselves.
yes.
Yeah, I think
I
there's
feel
a
that very
balance.
strongly. Yes. And I know that those spaces can get tripped up too. And so, but I see their value, and I just as you said, we have to protect the spaces also, and
Yeah,
access to those spaces, which, involve children who are under 18 sometimes. And
yeah,
that's okay.
absolutely. So this has been such a wonderful conversation. Is there anything that you really would love to add or share that we've missed?
I think the work of parenting is really hard. I remind parents that as you got through those toddler years, you will get through the adolescent years too. There are a lot of parallels to how you supported your kiddos during that time that will carry you through this time. And I think that that technology is not, it's not insurmountable. We just have to take control, and it has to be in the home. I have talked, ad nauseum to educators and to other people in the community, and it can't be, no, you do it, no, you do it, no, you do it. It has to be all of us together, pediatricians and teachers and educators and the tech company. We all have to do this together, and that is a big feat. But I feel like we're onto something. I feel like people are really thinking about this, and your podcast talks about a lot of this, and so I'm grateful that you guys are putting this out there.
Thank you. I'm off right now to go and tell my teenager that he's like a toddler. I think that will go down really well.
No. That's for you in your head, not to say.
Okay, I get it. Joking, of course.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. You've given me a lot to think about.
Oh, good. I'm so glad, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me too. I appreciate it.
That's great. And some wonderful takeaways for our parents and our audience, who I know really appreciate that when we talk about some of these tough topics. So thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Into the Digital Future. We hope you had as much fun listening as we had talking. For links and resources about any of the ideas, projects, or initiatives we discussed on this episode, please visit the CUNY Center website at cunycenter.org/future.
Into the Digital Future has been brought to you by Roblox and the Joan Gans CUNY Centre at Sesame Workshop. Your hosts are Jordan Shapiro and Laura Higgins. Matt Clark is our audio editor and production coordinator. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any episodes on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and more.